Hey everyone, welcome to Reality TV News Update, the place where you never miss a moment from your favorite shows. Big Brother 24 winner Taylor Hale decided to pose for Playboy. She is Miss March 2026 for the magazine. Taylor appeared during the summer 2022 season. She also won America's Favorite Player that season. Other cast members on BB24 included Monty Taylor, Matt Turner, Alyssa Snyder, Michael Brunner, Joseph Abdeen, and others. Nicole Franzel became the first person to win Big Brother twice after Taylor returned for Big Brother Reindeer Games. Taylor Hale from Big Brother 24 poses for Playboy. She also appeared with her then-boyfriend, Kyland Young, on The Amazing Race. In a new video, Taylor says, "Hi, I'm Miss March Taylor Hale, and this is why I shot for Playboy. I said yes to living inside a house where cameras watched me 24 hours a day. Microphones dangled above my head as I slept while being observed. It was explicit and contractual. But even there, the psychological boundaries of consent were more fraught than they appeared," Taylor shared. "Consenting to be observed is not the same as being consumed. Technically, I gave my permission to be filmed. Technically, I concurred with the possibility of seeing anything. And when I left that house, I said yes again to a career that depends on being seen," Taylor elaborated. Later in the video, Taylor speaks about how she shot with Playboy to be an active participant and assume her power in the process. She referred to it as an opportunity for self-reclamation. More from Taylor on her Playboy spread. Introducing Miss March 2026 Taylor Hale, best known as the first black woman to win Big Brother and has had an impressive TV career ever since, reads an Instagram post shared by Playboy and Taylor Hale. Hale, on the other hand, came to the realization, following her Big Brother victory, that screenshots taken from the show's live feed showing her naked body were widely circulated on social media. That's why she's here, bearing it all for Playboy. "This is an act of reclamation," she writes in the essay that accompanies her pictorial. The caption continued. Many Big Brother alums have shared their support in the comments. "Stop! Wow, I am drooling," wrote two-time player Bailey Dayton. Rachel Riley, who was crowned Big Brother's winner, wrote, "Girl, same, and I love this for you." Angela Murray of BB26 wrote in a post, "Taylor, I applaud your stance and the powerful message you articulate so well." More information from Big Brother and elsewhere. A Big Brother contestant's tornado encounter video went viral. It was an intense run-in for the reality TV star. Additionally, Big Brother fans are debating a new school All-Stars theme. Could this be of interest to the viewers at home? The cast of The Traitors 4 lost a Big Brother legend elsewhere. Additionally, they discussed the circumstances surrounding the event. Taylor Hale had already lived a lifetime in the public eye by the time the call came. She had gone from being a poised pageant queen after winning Big Brother 24 to being a symbol of resilience, someone who had to deal with isolation, criticism, and scrutiny to become stronger, sharper, and unapologetic for who she was. But this call was different. It came on a quiet afternoon in Los Angeles, when the city seemed to pause between golden sunlight and neon-lit evenings. Her phone buzzed softly as she sat by the window, flipping through a journal she hadn't touched in months. The voice said with a smile, "Taylor, we'd love to feature you as Miss March for Playboy." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked out at the skyline. Vast, complicated, beautiful. Much like her journey. The idea wasn't entirely unexpected. Since leaving the Big Brother house, Taylor had been approached with countless opportunities. Brand deals, interviews, speaking engagements. People admired her strength, her elegance under pressure, her ability to turn pain into purpose. However, this was quite different. Playboy wasn't as good as it used to be in its current incarnation. It had rebranded itself as a platform celebrating empowerment, storytelling, and self-defined beauty. Still, the legacy carried weight, and Taylor knew that whatever she chose, people would have opinions. She closed her journal and whispered to herself, "What do I want?" She had relied on that inquiry throughout everything, from pageants to reality television to life outside of the spotlight. It had become her compass. A week later, Taylor walked into the studio. It wasn't what she expected. Gone were the cliches she had imagined. Instead, the space was filled with soft lighting, warm tones, and a team that greeted her not as a model to be molded, but as a collaborator. "We want this to be your story," the creative director told her. "Not just images, but a narrative. How you now define yourself, who you are, and what you've overcome." Taylor gave a slow nod. For the first time, she felt something shift. This wasn't about fitting into an image, it was about reclaiming one. The shoot began simply. Taylor stood before a large window, sunlight cascading around her like a spotlight from the universe itself. She wore a silk robe, elegant, understated. The camera clicked, but it didn't feel invasive. It appeared to be collaborative. "What are you thinking about?" the photographer asked gently. Taylor laughed. She stated, "I'm thinking about the girl who entered the Big Brother house and how she had no idea what was coming." The room felt silent. She remembered the whispers, the isolation, and the times when the walls seemed to be closing in. But she also remembered the turning point, the decision to stop shrinking, to stand tall even when it felt impossible. "I'm thinking about how she survived," Taylor continued, "and how she came to learn to occupy space." The camera clicked again. As the shoot progressed, each set told a different chapter of her story. In one, she wore a structured blazer, powerful, commanding, symbolizing the strategist who outplayed expectations. In another, she was barefoot in flowing fabric, representing vulnerability and authenticity. There was laughter, too. Moments where she danced between shots, where the crew cheered her on, where she felt not observed but celebrated. And somewhere in between wardrobe changes and quiet reflections, Taylor realized something profound. She wasn't doing this for her own benefit. She was doing it for herself. Later that evening, wrapped in a blanket with a cup of tea, Taylor reviewed some of the photos. They were stunning, but more than that, they were honest. She saw strength in her posture, softness in her gaze, confidence in the way she held herself, not as someone seeking validation, but as someone who had already found it within. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from a former houseguest, someone who had once doubted her. "Just heard about the shoot. Proud of you," it read. Taylor smiled faintly. She thought that personal growth went beyond that. It rippled outward. It didn't take long for the March issue to start making waves. Headlines celebrated her as a trailblazer. Social media buzzed with admiration. Interviews followed, each one diving deeper into her journey. But what stood out most were the messages. She was contacted by women from all walks of life, and they told her their own stories of perseverance and how they learned to stand tall in places that had previously tried to diminish them. "You made me feel seen," one message read. "I've been afraid to own my story, but seeing you, it changed something." Taylor read each one carefully. This, she realized, was the real impact. Not the pictures, not the headlines, but the connection. In her feature interview, Taylor was asked a question she had come to expect. "What does being Miss March mean to you?" She paused, considering her answer. "It means redefining narratives," she said finally. "For so long, people have tried to put women into boxes, tell us who we should be, how we should look, what we should represent." She leaned forward slightly. "But this," she said, "it's about choice. It involves declaring, I decide who I am, and being unapologetic about it." Taylor came back to her apartment through the same window months later. Long after the news had spread, she felt different, even though the city looked the same. Stronger, lighter. She picked up her journal again and began to write. She began by saying, "March wasn't about becoming someone new. It was about embracing who I've always been." She paused before adding, "A woman who refuses to be defined by her lowest moments. A woman who chooses herself again and again." Closing the journal, Taylor looked out at the skyline once more. Her journey wasn't over. If anything, it was just beginning. But for the first time in a long time, she felt completely aligned with her past, her present, and whatever came next.
And that, she knew, was her greatest
Hale
victory
had always
of
known
all.
about perception's power, long before Big Brother 24. Before the cameras followed her every move and strangers debated her character online, she had lived in a world where presentation mattered. Pageants, interviews, first impressions. She was aware of how to carry herself, speak with intention, and command a room without speaking up. But nothing had prepared her for the kind of scrutiny she faced inside that house, or the kind of change that would come next. It was surreal when she won Big Brother 24. Everything blurred into a dreamlike haze for a brief moment as lights flickered and confetti fell. The same people who had once underestimated her were now applauding her. The audience was up and moving, and Taylor, composed, radiant, victorious, stood at the center of it all. She had accomplished more than winning a game. In real time, she had rewritten her story. Months later, life had settled into a new rhythm. Los Angeles, or something close to it, had become home. Her days were filled with meetings, brand partnerships, and interviews that all seemed to circle back to the same themes: resilience, grace, perseverance. However, Taylor was still asking herself deeper questions, despite the polished responses and public appearances. Who am I now? What do I want beyond survival? The chance came along slowly, not with flashing lights or dramatic announcements, but with a carefully worded email from a creative director representing Playboy's modern editorial team. They weren't looking for shock value. They were looking for a story. In the subject line, it said, "Miss March." Taylor stared at it longer than she expected. Playboy now has a different meaning than it did in the past. It had evolved, leaning into storytelling, individuality, and empowerment. Still, the name carried history, expectation, and inevitably, judgment. She closed her laptop without responding. No, not yet. That evening, she called her closest friend. "They want me to be Miss March," Taylor said, her voice calm but thoughtful. The other end of the line paused. "What do you want, then?" her friend questioned. Taylor exhaled softly. "I haven't decided yet." And the truth was that. Over the next few days, Taylor did something she hadn't had time to do in a while. She slowed down. She kept a diary, reflected, revisited old photos and moments from her past. She considered the hopeful, polished contestant who had just joined Big Brother, a girl whose expectations she hadn't fully questioned. Additionally, she contemplated the woman who left it, stronger, more certain, unwilling to shrink. The offer didn't just involve taking pictures. It was about stepping into another space where perception could be challenged or reinforced. The question was whether she could personalize it. In the end, Taylor agreed to the shoot with one condition. She stated to the group, "It has to be my story, not just how I look, but who I am." They did not dither. "That's exactly why we chose you," the creative director replied. The studio didn't feel like a set. It felt like a canvas. Soft music played in the background. The lighting was warm, intentional. Every detail, from wardrobe to backdrop, had been designed with care, but nothing felt rigid or imposed. Taylor arrived in a simple outfit, her hair pulled back, her presence effortlessly commanding. "Ready?" the photographer asked. Taylor laughed. "I'm now." The first shots were understated. Natural light streamed through large windows as Taylor stood in a relaxed pose, wearing a silk robe that moved gently with each step she took. The camera was clicking, but it didn't bother me. It felt like documentation. "What's on your mind?" the photographer wanted to know. Taylor thought for a moment. She stated, "I'm thinking about growth, about how uncomfortable it can be, and how necessary." Click. The studio told a different part of her journey in each segment. She wore a tailored suit with sharp lines and a strong posture, in one portraying the strategist who had won a difficult social game. In another, she was barefoot, dressed in soft, flowing fabric, symbolizing vulnerability and authenticity. Between takes, there was joking, conversations about identity, pressure,
and the strange reality of being known by millions of people who had never met you. Taylor noticed something out of the ordinary as he looked around the room at one point. She felt safe, not judged, not investigated, seen. She sat quietly with a cup of tea and flipped through a few preview shots on a tablet during a break. The images weren't about perfection. They were about presence. Her eyes reflected strength, ease in her posture, a quiet confidence that didn't need to prove anything. She said softly, "This doesn't feel like who I was." Leaning in, the creative director, "Who does it feel like?" Taylor laughed. "Who I've become now." The publication of the March issue almost immediately sparked discussion. She was praised for accepting her story and entering a space on her own terms. Others debated the decision, projecting their own interpretations onto it. Taylor expected that. What she didn't expect were the messages, hundreds of them, from women who identified with her on her journey, from people who were slowly learning to reclaim their stories after being judged, excluded, or misunderstood. "You made me rethink what confidence looks like," one message read. "I've been afraid to take up space," another said. "But seeing you, it helps." Taylor read every message she could, because to her, that was the real impact. In her feature interview, she was asked the inevitable question, "What does being Miss March mean to you?" Taylor didn't rush her answer. She said at the end, "It means ownership of my story, my image, my voice. For a long time, I felt like I had to fit into certain expectations, whether in pageants, on television, or in everyday life." She paused and carefully considered her words. "But now I understand that I get to define myself, not the audience, not the critics, me." As it always does, time passed. The headlines faded, the commotion abated, but the experience stayed with her. One evening, months later, Taylor found herself back in her apartment, watching the city lights flicker to life as the sun dipped below the horizon. She returned to her journal. She wrote, "Miss March was never about a title." She paused, then continued, "I stepped into a version of myself that I used to be afraid of, not because it was wrong, but because it was mine." She looked out over the skyline as she closed the journal. For the first time in a long time, there was no question in her mind about who she was or where she was going. She had faced the world's perceptions and chosen herself anyway. She knew that decision would set the tone for each subsequent chapter.